revelation, and there is nothing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has left out of that book that is beneficial for us. مَا فَرَّطْنَا فِي الْكِتَابِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing that we had that is deficient about this book. There's nothing that we have left out of it that you need for guidance. And so, as Muslims, we should be turning to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the sunnah of his Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the other form of revelation, in order for our guidance. And to really understand what it is that we are supposed to be doing as parents. So this talk is not necessarily for children as much as it is for parents, so that we understand our responsibility in raising our children. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says, Al-Malu wal-Banun Zinatul Hayatid Dunya. That wealth and children are the adornment, they're from the pleasures of this life. Wealth and children. And that's not, this isn't in a negative context, right? This is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning that these in fact are, these are positive things in your life if you engage with them in a positive way. Al-Malu wal-Banun Zinatul Hayatid Dunya. So Allah Azza wa Jalla has mentioned on several occasions that He yahabu liman yasha'u inatha. Allah Azza wa Jalla will grant whom He wishes female child, and He will grant whom He wishes a male child. But He calls it a hiba. And a hiba is a gift. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gifts children to parents. And if you don't think it's a gift, think about how many people in this country alone wish that they can have children, but they're not able to. Such that it has become a huge industry to figure out how to help people have children who the doctors have said cannot have children. Whether that's through IVF or other forms and medications and so forth. Because people really want that. And they view that as a favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's important for us to recognize that every gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be met in two different ways. We can either be grateful for that gift, or we can be ungrateful for the gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with. And so, in order for us to really recognize that, and recognize that our children are a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah Azza wa Jalla is their creator, and He has entrusted us, put us as the responsible parties in raising them. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says about the believers, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ. Those who are mindful of their trusts and their covenants. When He describes the believers. So a believer does what? Fulfills his trust and honors his covenants and honors his words. This is from the characteristics of a believer that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran. And Allah Azza wa Jalla has told us in the Quran, لا تخونوا الله والرسول وتخونوا أماناتكم وأنتم تعلمون. Don't betray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messenger and betray your trust while you know. And right after that, wa'lamu, and know that your children and your families and your wealth are a fitna. Like, what does fitna mean? Your children are a gift, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. And He also calls them a fitna. What is a fitna? Yeah. A trial. Okay. Say that again, sir. Opposition. Keep going. A test. A distraction. Okay, but let's take it back now. How can something be a gift and a fitna? Okay, time out. No, so would you say I'm looking forward to this fitna in my life? Anybody say something like that? Looking forward to this fitna? Huh? Allah Azza wa Jalla is letting you know that although they are a gift, every gift is actually a test. Atashkuru am takfur. Will you be grateful or will you be ungrateful? And notice that we're talking about shukr and kufr. Kufr being the opposite of shukr. So kufr doesn't always mean a rejection of faith. In fact, the asl or the base meaning of that word kufr is actually what? Ingratitude. And the greatest form of ingratitude is to reject the one who created you altogether. Not even acknowledge that he existed. Not even acknowledge the favor. And so that's why one who rejects Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is called a kafir. Okay? So the point is that your children are a gift, but they are also a test. And it's important for us to realize this point so that we don't take it for granted and that we try our best to pass that test. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam to clarify for us our responsibility towards our children. And Allah Azza wa Jalla has also made us feel that accountability in the Quran. When he says what? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. Oh, you who believe, save yourselves and your family. Not just yourself. Save yourselves and your families from the fire. Now, what's important here, subhanAllah, is because a lot of people, they push things on their families that they don't do themselves. And we're going to talk about that a little later on in the talk, inshallah. But it's important here that you save yourself first, meaning that you implement the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and those things that you're commanding your family with. When you get on an airplane, think about it like this. You get on an airplane and they tell you all of the instructions in the beginning in case of an emergency, right? And they say, if the cabin is running low on oxygen, what's going to happen? The mask is going to drop down. And then they tell you what? Put your mask on first before helping others. Save yourself and your family. But don't neglect your family, but just get your mask on first. Because if you don't, if you're not doing those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated you to do, and you don't have that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's going to be impossible or near impossible for you to be that person that's going to help save your family. And so it's critical. Save yourselves and your families from a fire whose fuel is men and stones. So here, Allah Azza wa Jalla is instructing us to be very mindful of our responsibility to ourselves and also the accountability that we have to Him for our families. And the Prophet ﷺ further emphasized this point. The hadith of Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu in Sahihain, when he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْعُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. Each one of you is a shepherd. Each one of you is a shepherd, and each one of you is mas'ul for his flock. And I want to stop at a few words here. The first one is shepherd. What is a shepherd? SubhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ was talking to a people who were dealt with agriculture and animals and things like that. I don't have all the PlayStation terms and all that stuff. So I don't really know how to talk to some generations in their language. But let us try to understand what our Prophet ﷺ said when he said that each one of you is a shepherd. Yeah.
Someone who has a responsibility over a group.
Okay, so what does a shepherd do? A shepherd, okay. So a shepherd has this flock of sheep. And his responsibility is to help make sure that those sheep, that they eat what they're supposed to eat. That they don't eat what they're not supposed to eat. That's another point, because sometimes they may be grazing in areas that have, poisonous things. So they have to make sure that they don't go into areas that they're not, or that they don't eat what they're not supposed to eat. Also, that they stay away from the areas that belong to someone else. And what? Protect them from wolves and any other types of predators. And then to stop them from doing dumb stuff. No, seriously. So, subhanAllah, when you really contemplate this, when you think about a shepherd, because we're talking about sheep, right? Sheep are not the smartest animals. I don't know if you know that. But literally, if one walks off a cliff, like, okay, we're human beings. You see somebody fall off a cliff, it's like, subhanAllah, right? Stop back. Alhamdulillah, that wasn't me. The sheep will see one sheep fall off the cliff. You know what they do? Go right after him. Boom. And a third one, because they're not smart. So, subhanAllah, they got big hearts and small brains. Literally. As in, like if you cut a sheep open, dissect it, a sheep, they've got huge hearts, subhanAllah. Like they're good. Tayyib, yani. Good natured, right? But real small brains. So the Prophet ﷺ giving us the example of a shepherd here is significant. Because you really have a flock that you have to really maintain. Like this is not one of those things you just let them go. Like you really have to be on the watch. And this is how you have to be with your flock. With the ones who are under your care. وَالرَّجُلُ رَاعٍ عَلَىٰ أَهْلِ بَيْتِهِ وَهُوَ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْهُمْ. The Prophet said. And a man, he says the man is a ra'i. Yani he is a shepherd for the people of his home. And he is mas'ulun anhum. So he's supposed to be making sure that they eat what is tayyib. That they eat halal. Some people don't care what their kids eat. SubhanAllah. You're supposed to be making sure not only that you provide halal for them, but that that's what they're eating. And that they're not eating those things which are going to be harmful for them. That they eat from the tayyib. You're supposed to be making sure that the environment that they're in is safe for them. Which means if you're beating their mother, you got a problem. Because they don't feel safe in that house. You're supposed to make sure that they're not going to places that are going to subject them to harm. And, subhanAllah, so that concept of being a shepherd is an amazing parable that the Prophet ﷺ is giving us here. وَالرَّجُلُ رَاعٍ عَلَىٰ أَهْلِ بَيْتِهِ, he is the shepherd for the people of his home. وَهُوَ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْهُمْ. The Prophet ﷺ used the word mas'ul, which is translated many different ways. But if we understand just a little bit of the Arabic, we'll see how it has significance both in the dunya and in the hereafter. So mas'ul comes from that root sa'ala. And mas'ul, which means what? Sa'ala. To ask. Okay, so mas'ul means that the person is asked. Okay, he is questioned. Questioned when? Questioned when? When is the man going to be questioned? On Yawm al-Qiyamah. He's going to be asked about his flock. But it also means responsible. So, meaning that in this life, the man has to understand that he is responsible for his family. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that his children do or everything that happens in his house, that he's accountable for that. لا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى. No soul shall bear the burden of another soul. But he does have the responsibility to keep things in check to the best of his ability. And some things that happen outside of his ability to know. And subhanAllah, some of your children, they need phones. They live active lives outside the house and so on and so forth. Okay, you can't control what they do on that phone. It's not something that you can control. What you can do is give them the principles and the life skills that are necessary for them to navigate through the trash that's on the internet and be able to use their phone in a way that's beneficial for them. In fact, in that particular ayat, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Oh, you believe, save yourselves and your family from the fire. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, that is, and tu'allimuhum wa tu'addibuhum. That is to teach them and to discipline them. Teach them etiquettes, teach them manners, teach them the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of this is part of saving them from the fire. Now that being said, and after we understand that we are, that is that the man is responsible for the people of his home. And then the Prophet ﷺ also went on to say, وَالْمَرْأَةُ رَاعِيَةٌ. The woman is also a shepherd. And she stands in for the man when he is not present. And so she has a great responsibility also for that family and maintaining the teachings and the etiquettes of Islam. Who is it that has most influence over children? School? The masjid? Social media? Absolutely not. It's the parents, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Parents have the most influence over their children, and in fact, the formative years, as long as they're in their lives, the formative years of that child's life and their outlook, their worldview, and so forth, that's going to initially come from the home. It doesn't mean that social media won't have some kind of influence. Doesn't mean that the school is not going to influence them. It is. People are products of their environments. But there are certain things that get instilled early that bi'idhnillahi ta'ala can serve as a protection. Our Prophet ﷺ said about all children, kullu mawludin yuladu ala al-fitra. All children are born on the fitra. What is the fitra? What's the fitra? Yeah.
Inclination.
The inclination to what though? That Allah is the greatest. Keep going.
The natural disposition.
It is a natural disposition. But what is our natural disposition? Islam. It is Islam. So now listen though. The fitrah, as many of the scholars of Islam have mentioned, is actually two. One is a fitrah of worship, and the other is the fitrah of worshiping Allah alone. Okay. Two, the fitrah of worship, and the second, fitrah of worshiping Allah alone. The Prophet ﷺ said, what? فَأَبَوَاهُ. Every child is born upon the fitrah. فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ وَيُنَصِّرَانِهِ وَيُمَجِّسَانِهِ. And he did not say وَيُمَسْلِمَانِهِ. He said that each one is born on the fitrah. They have a natural inclination towards the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. But their parents do what? Not school. And I know we're talking at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was saying, but he mentioned the parents for a reason. Because children have a natural attachment to their families. I don't care if that person was adopted and didn't know they were adopted. You know what happens as they growing up? You can read all these stories. They say something never felt right. Something never felt right. There was a disconnect. SubhanAllah. And so they go, and why do you think people do all this stuff now? These genetic tests and things. Because people have a natural need and they feel, they want to know. They want to know. They want to know who their real parents are. Parents, this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. It's just how it is. We have that natural connection to our parents. So the Prophet ﷺ said for Abawahu, his parents turned him into a Jew or a Christian or a Majusi, which has different translations. The point here is that the parents have that effect and therefore have that responsibility of doing their best in raising their children. Now, what happens here, and the reason why they talk about the fitrah as being worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Not that we have details of how to do that worship. But that fitrah of worship never changes, even if a person worships other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no human being on the face of the earth who does not worship something. And that's because that is a part of our makeup as human beings. Taahir. So here we have this responsibility. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is explaining to us that we have this responsibility. And because of that, it is important that we look at some of those things, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, that will help us fulfill that responsibility in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And from that, I want to mention 7 guidelines that were mentioned by our Shaikh Abdul Razak bin Abdul Muhsin al-Badr, hafidhahullah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve him and his father. And inshallah, I'm going to summarize them to the best of my ability, but I want you to keep every single one of these ones in mind, because they are extremely important points that were mentioned. The first of these points is that every parent should make dua for their children. Make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them righteous. This is before they come and after they come. Meaning before you have children, you should be making dua for righteous offspring. After they come, you make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides them and keeps them firm and makes them from those who establish the salat, makes them from so forth. And once you see them practicing the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you make dua that Allah grant them istiqamah, that they stay firm on the path of Islam. And this is a responsibility of every parent. Don't think that because you drove your children to every basketball game and you attended this thing and you were there and you were the greatest dad and all this nice stuff, that's what's going to make them good servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And wallah, it doesn't matter how successful they are in the dunya. If they're not servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willingly, then that success will mean nothing for them. They can't take that success with them in the grave, and it's not going to mean anything. And a lot of parents will put a whole lot of effort into making sure that their children get the best of the dunya, and don't put 10% of that effort into making sure that they know their responsibility to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is actually a disservice to the children. That's a disservice. So we make sure that they have, and this is real common in among people who don't come from much. We say, I want my children to have all the things that I didn't have. SubhanAllah. That's our goal, just to make sure that they have material possessions. That stuff can go in a day and a night. Last week, I was in California. I was giving a class on Saturday on al-Iman bil-Qadr. Belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree. And I mentioned how we utter a lot of phrases on our tongue that show that we really don't have a firm belief in Allah Azza wa Jall's qadr. Like we don't really understand. He didn't deserve to die. She died so young, and all this, we say these type of things. People say it all the time. It wasn't his time yet. Clearly it was his time. And things like this was on Saturday. Sunday, I go back and I'm giving a class. And then we have a break in the class. It's about 10 a.m. So brother comes to me and he says, hey, you know what you were talking about yesterday? I said, what's that? He said, you were talking about how, if a person's time comes, nobody can delay it. And, there's no such thing as a person, dying too young and this type of stuff like that. He said, Kobe Bryant just died. I mean, we were right there in California, right? But But the point is what? That we put a whole lot, we invest a whole lot into the dunya. And if we don't have that knowledge of the hereafter, then we're not going to prepare for it, and we're not going to be ready for it. And so you get a guy who dies worth $500 million or whatever, and died without Islam. What does that do for you in the grave? All of that wealth that you have that you can't benefit from. يَتْبَعُ الْمَيِّتِ ثَلَاثًا. There are three things that follow the one who dies. أهله وماله وعمله. His children, his family, his wealth, and his actions. فَيَرْجِعُ اثْنَيْنِ وَيَبْقَى وَاحِدٌ. Two of them are going to go back. Only one is going to stay with him, and that's his actions. So subhanAllah, the values that we instill in our children are critical. Making that dua for them is important. So this was the dua of the prophets themselves. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he made several dua for his children. Rabbi habli min as-salihin. Oh Allah, grant me from the righteous ones. Grant me children that are righteous. And this was when? Before he had children, alayhi salam. And then we know that the dua of Ibrahim, when he said, وَجَنُوبَنِي وَبَنِيَّ أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ. He made that dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to what? Push the worship of idols away from him and his children. Save me from worshiping idols, me and my children. This is the dua of a prophet. And he didn't want to be from amongst the mushrikeen. And he didn't want his children to be from amongst the mushrikeen. He wanted them to be firm on Islam. رَبِّ اجْعَلْنِي مُقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي رَبَّنَا وَتَقَبَّلْ دُعَاء. Oh Allah, make me from amongst those who establish the salah, and from my children, and from my offspring, and accept my dua. Zakaria alayhi salam, when he saw Maryam alayhi salam getting this rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at times when she would have the fruit of the summer and the winter, and he realized, and not that he didn't know, but this was an affirmation of the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even though he was old and his wife was barren, he still made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. هُنَالِكَ دَعَا زَكَرِيَّا رَبَّهُ قَالَ رَبِّي هَبْ لِي مِن لَدُنْكَ ذُرِّيَّةً طَيِّبَةً إِنَّكَ سَمِيعُ الدُّعَاءِ. At that point, Zakaria made dua. هُنَالِكَ دَعَا زَكَرِيَّا رَبَّهُ. He made dua to his Lord. And he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, grant me, gift me from you a righteous, tayyib, pure offspring. Indeed, you are the one that hears dua. So again, we see that offspring, having children, is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you should be making dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them tayyib, that Allah azza wa jalla make them salih, yani righteous and pure. From the dua of Ibad al-Rahman, it comes at the end of Surah Al-Furqan. وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Here, what's the dua that the Ibad al-Rahman make? And we should all be striving to be from the Ibad al-Rahman and take those characteristics of those who are true servants of al-Rahman. Their dua, they would say, Rabbana, gift, habalana, grant us from our wives, from our spouses and our offspring, qurrata a'yun. What is qurrata a'yun? What does that mean? The Prophet ﷺ said, Ju'ilat qurratu ayni fi salat. What does that mean? The coolness of the eye. I'm really glad you did that, Shaikh. Jazakallah khair. We don't talk like that in English, so I'm trying to So I want us to understand what that means. What does it mean when you say the coolness of my eye? The Prophet ﷺ said that the coolness of my eye has been made in salah. How does that work? What does that mean? Makes you happy. You enjoy it. It's delightful, right? So here, the Ibadur Rahman, the true service of Ar-Rahman, they ask Allah to make from their spouses and their offspring, their children, that which brings them happiness and enjoyment. The scholars of tafsir, the early scholars of tafsir, the tabi'een, they said that this is that you see them, that you actually see from your spouses and your children the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is that you see them practicing Islam. It is that Allah Azza wa Jal, as some of the Salaf said, guides from them those who were not Muslim to become Muslim. Dua is azim. That's a great dua. And again, it's when we recognize, wallahi, subhanAllah, as I was thinking about this whole issue of raising children, I realized how flawed I am personally in raising my own children. You know, we realize there's, subhanAllah, anything we read about in Islam, we really start digging deep and we start reading about salat and the salat of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, the salat of the companions. And we realize, man, we haven't even done anything yet. Like, my salat is like at a negative, negative something. If this was the salat of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, you really start to realize how weak we are. And there's nothing that's going to save us except for asking Allah for His mercy. Really, like we really have to realize that it's not in your hands. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. But you have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make you a good parent, to forgive you for your shortcomings in parenting, because we have them. Parenting, unlike salat, which the Prophet says, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. So we can go, mashallah, we can look at the different hadith, gather it up, basically exactly how the Prophet ﷺ prayed. How much he spaced his fingers out. Were they like this, were they like this, in different positions, subhanAllah. But for parenting, we don't have that same manual, because each child is different. Even children in the same household, from the same DNA and everything like that, they're different. And so subhanAllah, you realize it's about dua. It's about tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He has guided you to be able to do that. And the something important here to realize, in this hadith of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and there's some question about its authenticity, but many of the scholars of hadith, including Shaikh al-Bani, said the hadith is hasan. It's a fair hadith. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, ثلاث دعوات يستجاب لهن لا شك فيهن. There are 3 petitions that a person makes, 3 prayers, 3 du'as that a person makes that are answered by Allah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Da'watul madlumi wa da'watul musafir wa da'watul walid li waladihi. The dua of the one who is oppressed, and the dua of the traveler, and the dua of a parent for their child. So we should be making dua for our children, making dua for their success in this life and the next. Like, on a serious note, how often do we pray for our children? Like, really just beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the last third of the night, between Adhan and Iqamah, when it's raining. Like, how often is that dua for the ones who are going to carry your name? Or do we reciprocate the type of behavior that often they show us? He's 15, he's 16. SubhanAllah, smelling himself. He knows everything already at 15. You know that, right? You know when you're 15, definitely you got the world figured out. And nobody else, mashallah, except for the people in your age group. Everybody else, I mean, if they're 17, then that's my old head, and you know, but come on, man. Dad, he don't know nothing. Mom, come on, they might even ask, did y'all, you know, like, did y'all have color TVs when y'all was coming up? You know, like because they already know everything. And so now, as parents, what do? Sometimes, and it's not because we're being petty, it's just because of human nature. It's just like, well, look, if you got it all figured out, go ahead and do you. Right? And but that can't be our attitude. Really. That can't be how we do that. You have to be the bigger person, as they say. Make dua for them. Beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide them. And always leave the door open, as we're going to talk about, inshallah ta'ala. The second thing, so number one is what? Sure. Yeah, because I want you to put this in. I want you to implement this stuff. We're not talking. I'm not just talking to talk. SubhanAllah. And Shaikh Noor, I tell you, I was trying to figure out every kind of way to wiggle out of this talk. I'm not just here just to talk. I want you to learn something. Take this and implement it in your lives. And if you don't have any children that are of that age that need to be reared, perhaps you have grandchildren that are of that age. You might need to talk to your children about some of these things. The second thing, and it's critical, subhanAllah, from the sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ, being just between your children. Being fair and just when it comes to your children. Naturally, and children, I don't care what your parents tell you, it's natural that you're going to have an attachment to some of your children over others. It's a natural thing. It's just the way it is. You got 5 kids, you got 10 kids, 2 of them stand out. They're more righteous than the rest of them. They're better to you than the rest of them. They love you more than... It is what it is. That's how it goes. But you have to be fair and just between your children. And the Prophet ﷺ established this in general because justice is part of Islam, and specifically in the hadith of Nu'man ibn Bashir radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. Nu'man ibn Bashir, do you know what Nu'man ibn Bashir was? You know his hadith. He's got a famous hadith. 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. Inna al-halal bayyin wa inna al-haram bayyin. The halal is clear and the haram is clear, and between them there are gray areas, right? Taahir. That's the hadith of Nu'man. He was young. He was young, very young. In any event, his father al-Bashir favored him. And he gave him some of his wealth, as he says. In some narrations it clarifies that he actually gave him one of his slaves. And he went to the Prophet ﷺ to bear witness to this transaction. And he was giving his son this. And the Prophet ﷺ said, did you give this to all of your children? Kullu waladik nahalta mithl hada? You gave this as a gift to all of your children? And he said, no. And the Prophet ﷺ said, فَلَا إِذَنْ. And in some narrations, إِنِّي لَا أَشْهَدُ عَلَى الْجَوْرِ. I do not bear witness to jawr, injustice. Ittaqullah wa'adilu bayna awladikum. Fear Allah and be just between your children. Now, this is from the sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ, and I want us just to dig a slight bit deeper to understand it. This. When you are not fair with your children, not only will it cause them to have some kind of feelings amongst each other. Look at what the brothers of Yusuf, how they were with Yusuf alayhi salam and Binyamin. Right? Look at how that created problems between the siblings. Even though the one who was being unjust was who? I'm not talking about Yaqub. I'm saying the injustice that's done is not being because of the child, is because of the parent showing favoritism to one of them. But it causes strife between the children themselves. And that is prohibited in Islam. Those things which cause which cause enmity between brothers in Islam are haram. The Prophet ﷺ made them haram. Which is why the Prophet ﷺ said what? لا يبيع أحدكم على بيع أخيه. Don't come and interrupt the sale of your brother. And wait a minute, how much he selling that to you for? Man, I got it over here for $10 less, 20% less. Why? Because that's going to cause friction between brothers in Islam. What about brothers in Islam in the same house? They've got blood and Islam. And so we can't do that. That's number one. But number two, you know what else it does? And this is deep. I hope we get this point. It causes the other children in the house to recognize your unfairness and perhaps not respect you the way that they are commanded to respect you, and therefore you are a cause of them not being bar, not being dutiful and kind to you as a parent. You now become the cause of them disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their command is to do what? To treat you with kindness and respect and be dutiful to you. But you that have led them to what? Disrespect you and be unkind to you and not see you in a favorable light. It gets deeper than that, but we'll stop right there. Just understand this point here. So, from the sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ, and it is a command that we are just between our children. I'm going to stop for that then, inshallah. Allah. Allah. Hit that, Shaikh. Hit that so it goes off. Just hit the button. Just to answer this question very quick, it says, do we say that for Muslims who die? Can we say that for disbelievers as well? That's not dua. That's not dua. We are announcing that we belong to Allah, kafir or not. We belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To Him we will return. So we say that upon death. Upon death. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We belong to Allah. To Him we will return. That reminder of death is not only when a Muslim dies. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Kafa bil mawti maw'idha." Death is enough as an admonition. And that death doesn't just have to be when someone is a Muslim. We don't make dua. We don't make dua for mercy for those who die upon other than Islam. The third point is to be gentle with your children. Avoid being harsh. Have mercy on them. Have mercy on them. ليس منا من لم يرحم صغيرنا ويعرف حق كبيرنا. He is not of us who does not have mercy on our young and does not know the rights of our elders. He does not have that respect for those who are elder. And our Prophet ﷺ said, "ما كان الرفق في شيء إلا زانه." that rifq, gentleness, is not placed in anything except that it beautifies it. وَمَا نُزِعَ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا شَانَهُ. And it hasn't been removed from anything except that it makes that thing ugly. It gets ugly when there's no mercy. And so having mercy on these young ones is important, man. You can create an environment in the house that's a merciful environment, one that is gentle. The Prophet ﷺ kissed his grandson Al-Hasan ibn Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu in the presence of Al-Aqra' ibn Habis. And Al-Aqra' said to the Prophet ﷺ, I have 10 children. I haven't kissed any of them. Never. And so the Prophet ﷺ responded to him by saying, Man la yarham, la yurham. He who does not show mercy will not be shown mercy. And so the natural disposition of a parent in dealing with their children should be one of mercy, because this gentleness and mercy leads to love. And love is important because it makes it more likely that the children will fulfill their duty of obedience and kindness and respect and dutifulness to their parents. Creating that love is important. Creating that love is important. And the ulama of Islam, they mentioned that love is of two types. Mm-hmm. You have love that is beneficial and love that is harmful. And beneficial love is loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is loving for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number one, loving Allah. Number two, loving for the sake of Allah. Like what? Like your love of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Like your love of other believers. And that love is going to vary in intensity. And then the third type of love is the love that aids you in obedience to Allah. Even if that's third type of beneficial love. Even though that love may be natural. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it natural for children to what? Love their parents. That love aids them in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it makes you easier to obey your parents when you love them. It makes it easier for you to respect them. It makes it easier for you to be dutiful to them. Like the fourth point, what's numbers 1, 2, and 3? Numbers 1, 2, and 3. Huh? Making dua for your children. Number 2 is that you are just between your children. And number 3 is that you are gentle and merciful in your dealings with them. The fourth thing is that you have to serve as a mentor, as an advisor, as a guide for your children in all that is good, deen and dunya. That you have to be that mentor for them. You can't just leave them to the wolves. You have to be the one that takes on that responsibility of trying to guide them to the right. But the most important thing that you can teach your children is not how to hike or set up a tent or hit the target. The most important thing that you can teach your children is sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That they are sincere, that they make their deen, their entire way of life, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are several instances where we get that. And we see that Ibrahim alayhi salam, who made that dua for his children. What du'as did Ibrahim make for his children? Before they came, he made dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them what? From the Salihin. And then after he had children, he made dua that Allah what? Protect him and his children from idolatry, from worshiping other than Allah. And he made dua that Allah make him and his children what? From those who established the salah. And Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَصَّى بِهَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ وَوَصَّى بِهَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ بَنِيهِ وَيَعْقُوبُ يَا بَنِيَّ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَى لَكُمُ الدِّينَ فَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Listen to that great advice from Ibrahim. him and Yaqub, the advice that they gave to their children was to remind them what? On their deathbed, Inna Allah has stafa lakum ad-din. Allah Azza wa Jalla has chosen for you this way of life. Subhanallah. Out of all the other things that a person could be, but Allah Azza wa Jalla blessed them to be from His worshippers. So what? Because Allah blessed you with this, don't die except as Muslims. Except as Muslims. You see, this was their concern. Not don't die except as doctors, don't die except as engineers. Don't die except as Muslims. And we see that all of that stress, and again, and I can't emphasize this point enough. Too many times, we want our children to have. We believe that that is the be-all, end-all, that that's what makes us good parents, because our children have. Have what? Have the things that I didn't have when I was growing up. And that's not enough. That is simply not enough. We have to focus on this deen. What was one of the first things that Luqman said to his child? Ya bunayya, la tushrik billah. Look at that. Look at that advice that he gave. Oh, my son, don't what? Associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does that look like when we talk to our children now? What I mean by that is, we don't really live in a society that openly worships idols. Like nobody's going down. There's a big statue of Buddha in front of the city hall, and people are going down, bowing down to it. What does idol worship look like for us?
Entertainers, athletes.
Entertainers, athletes. There's a level there. 9.
Video game.
Subhanallah. The brother over here talked about social media earlier. So what is social media, by the way? What are you doing? You're showing off your life to other people. Right? I mean, is that what we're doing? For what purpose? Wanting a pleasure, a response from them of approval. Right? No, seriously. Think. What are you doing on social media? What are people doing? Self-exaltation. Boost myself up. And I want you to do what? Affirm. I want you to validate who I am. So I'm looking for pleasure. I'm looking to please other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, perhaps at the expense of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I may do things that I want other people to praise me for, even though those things may be haram. That's a form of idol worship. It's called people pleasing. And it's a form of idol worship. So don't just think, when we tell our children, la tushrik billah, what are we telling them? That your worship has to be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Him alone, and don't compromise on that. We're not compromising on that. We're not going to go around pleasing people to displease Allah. And we're not going to please people at the expense of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's very important, that as parents, that we recognize the importance of teaching our children at Tawheed, putting them in environments where they can also learn more about their deen, especially the creed side, but not to leave off the side of the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and avoiding His prohibitions. So our children need to know from an early age things that are prohibited in Islam. Even though those things may seem minor, subhanAllah, they add up. And this is why you see the Prophet ﷺ, when his stepchild was eating from all over the plate, what did the Prophet ﷺ tell her? He said what? Kul mimma yali. Eat that which is close to you. Sammillah. Sammillah. Say Bismillah before you eat. وَكُلْ بِيَمِينِكَ, and eat with your right hand. And eat from that which is close to you on the plate. He was young. The Prophet ﷺ is teaching him these Islamic etiquette. Start in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Start Bismillah. Look at that. Just teaching him those things, those etiquettes. But yet we have parents who don't even observe those etiquettes themselves. And so what do we expect from the children? Now, the point here is that what? You teach your children which is what they need to know from the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm talking about not associating partners with him in Tawheed, and then the major commands of Islam, and especially as-salah. Especially salah. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا لَا نَسْأَلُكَ رِزْقًا. Subhanallah, and this theme is repeated in the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? Command your family with the prayer. And you also have patience in establishing the salah. We're not asking you for rizq. نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكَ. In fact, we are the ones who provide for you. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, we're not created jinn and mankind, except that they, with that purpose of worship. Then Allah says what? مَا نُرِيدُ مِنْهُمْ مِنْ رِزْقٍ. We don't want any provision from them. وَمَا نُرِيدُ أَنْ يُطْعِمُونَ. And we don't want from them to feed us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, there's nothing you're going to do to provide for him. He provides for you despite the fact that you stopped working for ibadah. See, in our mind, our rizq comes from what? Work. Your rizq, in our minds, we're not thinking right. Our rizq comes from work. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, no, rizq comes from me. Pray. Pray when it's time to pray. And you can tell those non-Muslims, listen, check this out, I'm a Muslim, and I'm going to Jumu'ah. And guess what? See, subhanAllah, the reality is that people are going to test you. We're going to test you. And when you're firm and you really believe, it'll transcend you. Like, you don't even have to express that. They'll see from you that you're dead serious about that. And bi'idhnillah, they're going to conform. Now, if you had that kind of job where you literally you're saving somebody's life, you're doing a heart transplant, and it's Jumu'ah, you can keep doing a heart transplant. There are exceptions to the rule. But in general, no, you have to establish salah. وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ. The command with anything in Islam is a command with that thing and those things which that thing cannot be possible without. What does that mean? Well, to command your children with salah properly, then you have to do what? You have to teach them how to make the salah. You have to teach them the conditions, the shurut the salah, meaning the prerequisites of the salah. So you have to teach them how to make wudu properly. And all of the other things that revolve around the prayer itself. Right. Point is, number 4 is that you need to be a mentor to your children. And never forget, after that, along with being a mentor and a guide, that you have to be a good example. And that's number 5. You should be a good example to your children. Do you command the people to do good and you forget yourself? And you think your children don't see that? And they believe that you're just the biggest hypocrite? You say all this, you tell us to do all these things, and I just heard you on the phone lying. I just heard you. No, you can't. That's not going to work. You're going to create an environment where it makes it very difficult for your children to respect you, even though that's their obligation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it's important that your actions don't contradict your statements. And these are some of the tools that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in our lives to help us be straight. SubhanAllah, not everybody is reminded solely from the Quran. Not everybody is reminded solely from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes there are things, maybe you're in a position Maybe you're the imam of the masjid, so you realize, man, I can't do those things I used to do because I'm in this position. Well, as a parent, you have to realize that you're in a position that there are people that you are responsible for. Allah Azza wa Jal gave them to you as a gift and as a fitna, as a test. So you going to lead them astray, or are you going to help your children be upright because you become more upright? You start to realize that, man, I can't tell them to do this and I'm not doing that. So sometimes Allah Azza wa Jal gives us those things to help us straighten ourselves out. Number 6 is that you pay close attention to your children's friends. As-sahib sahib, what they say. The friend is going to pull you in that direction. وَالْمَرْءُ عَلَى دِينِ خَلِيلٍ. So whoever your child's bosom friend is, the one he's always with, the one she's always hanging out with, always on the phone with, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that person is on that person's deen. There's no way they're hanging together like that except that they share a whole lot in common. And the Prophet ﷺ reminded us, he gave us that example, مَثَلُ الْجَلِيسِ الصَّالِحِ وَجَلِيسِ السُّوءِ كَبَائِعِ الْمِسْكِ وَنَافِخِ الْكِيرِ. That the example of the good companion and the bad companion is like the one who sells mist and the one who blows the bellows, the blacksmith. And he finished the example. The point here is that it is critical, and don't ever let your children feel like you're minding their business. Or you don't have any business like that. I mind every business in the house. Everything in this house is my business. And so you have to be very keen on who your children are around. You need to know them. You should know who their parents are. That's not over the top. And sometimes people, in this day and age especially, when they can make friends without actually going anywhere, on the internet, through video games and so forth, you need to have some type of system where you talk and communicate openly with your children about the people that they're around. Not necessarily, you can't control everything, especially things that happen outside of the house. But you need to be opening up that communication to find out, okay, who is this person and what are they about in life? Do their values match with your values? Or are there people going to pull you in a direction that's not going to be beneficial for you in this life or the next? And so it's very important that you know who your children, who their friends are, what websites they're visiting and so forth. This is important as a parent. And last thing that we're going to mention, number 7, being back Taahir so that we can stop, is that with all of the above, a parent should never rely on means and reasons alone. That your trust has to be in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same way that you make dua for your children, right? That Allah Azza wa Jal make them righteous, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them thabat and firmness in the deen and so forth. The same way that you make that dua for them, you have to make dua for yourself. Make dua for yourself, that Allah Azza wa Jal gives you the strength, that Allah guides you, that He gives you clarity, that to the end of it. So that Allah Azza wa Jal blesses you to raise righteous children. Raise children that are obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Children who will benefit you in this life and the next. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that مَاتَ ابْنُ آدَمَ انْقَطَعَ عَمَلُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ. That when the son of Adam dies, all of his deeds are cut off except for 3. And the Prophet ﷺ said, amongst those 3, وَلَدٌ صَالِحٌ يَدْعُو لَهُ. A righteous child, a righteous child that makes dua for him. Question. When we mention the names of the Sahaba, we say, radiyallahu anhu. May Allah be pleased with him. That's dua for that Sahabi, right? Does the Sahabi benefit from that dua? Yes? Okay, Prophet ﷺ said when you die, all of your actions stop except for 3. And he only mentioned a righteous child that makes dua for you. Hey, you say Rahimahullah when you mention the name of one of the ulama, for example. Allah have mercy on him. Huh?
This is probably a big deal.
Okay, so it's a dua. So then it doesn't just have to be a righteous child. It could be anybody make dua for me, I'm going to benefit. But that's not what the hadith said. The hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said all of his actions. Listen. All of his actions, not other people's actions. Somebody else might make hajj on your behalf, benefit you. All of your actions stop, except for what? Pay attention. Waladun salihun yad'u lahu. A righteous child, his righteous child that benefits from him. Prophet ﷺ is indicating here to us that your child is from your actions. You understand that? Your child is from your actions. Number 1, he's from your actions to be created. Number 2, he's righteous by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's leave because of the action, the effort that you put into raising him. So notice, subhanAllah, that putting that work in this life will benefit you in this life and the next. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from amongst the righteous who raise righteous children. I just talked for like an hour and some change. Oh, questions? I'll do that.
You can take 2 or 3 questions.
So I already answered this sister's question. Any questions? Alhamdulillah, no questions. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Now, so the question is, if a person is performing a surgery on someone, and they're required to be performing that surgery for an 8-hour period, for example, whereby the several salat may come in. Like, for example, you started at dhuhr time, or before dhuhr, 12 o'clock, which is before dhuhr, and you're in surgery for 8 hours. You're going to miss dhuhr, asr, and maghrib. And the answer to that question is that is permissible under the circumstances. That's permissible under the circumstances, and the person should make up those salawat starting with the first salat that he missed. So he should do them in order. So he make up dhuhr, and then asr, and then maghrib, and then he prays isha. Allahu Akbar. And that goes for any type of situation that may be similar, where other people's lives depend on that. Like a pilot, for example, if there's no automatic pilot, there's no co-pilot, he's the only one, or whatever the situation may be, and he has to be there, and his life and other people's lives are at stake. And you do that job, and then you pray. Nah, anything else? Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin. See nobody. Nah,